Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast talks about human development and psychology to try and help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we left off on the personality factors associated with adolescence and the four identity statuses. Remember, they're not steps, they're statuses, because everybody's different. And we're going to take up on gender difference in identity formation, because there is a little bit of difference between the sexes. Much research supports Erickson's view that for women, identity and intimacy develop together. So, for females, intimacy is a part of who we are. We want to have good relationships with our family, our friends, people we work with. That's just part of who we are. Indeed, intimacy matters more to girls than to boys, even in grade school friendships. So, even at that age, girls are still looking to make, connections with people that can be a part of our life. According to Carol Gilligan, the female sense of self develops not so much through achieving a separate identity as through establishing relationships. And there's some truth in that, but we also do, develop a separate identity. But part of our identity is, being with the people that we care about. Girls and women, says Gilligan, judge themselves on their handling of their responsibilities and on their ability to care for others as well as for themselves. So when we're going all out for the family or trying to make things perfect or whatever, and men are like, oh, good enough, or no, it's too much, don't want, that irks us, because we're doing this because we think it's necessary, and so men, think about that. When your women are trying to work on the relationship, it's because that's important to her. And in her mind, it should also be important to you. So go along with it. Go along to get along. And caring for others is important to women too. So when they're trying to take care of you, make you take your meds or, a bath or whatever, they're not being naggy. They're just trying to take care of you. They're trying to do what's best for you. And, taking time for themselves, taking care of themselves. Some men think, that's selfish. But no, that's important to them because they need time to regroup and take care of themselves. It's like the old saying about you can't pour from an empty cup. Women have to fill their cup first, and this is something I had to teach my coaching clients. You have to fill your cup first before you can have overflow to pour out for others. So for women, this is an important thing. Some developmental scientists, however, have begun to question how different the male and female paths to identity really are, especially today, and to suggest that individual differences may be more important than gender differences. And that's because, as we know, there's a whole lot of gender identity things going on today. And, it could be a fad. I don't want to, say there's not this, that, or the other thing. But it seems like here in the past few decades, it's become kind of ridiculous, when we have sexual identity as people who like to be furries and do it with other furries. That's not a sexual identity. In my day, that would be called a kink. So, things can be different nowadays, but, psychology, is trying to be inclusive of that, and I guess that's a good thing. Indeed, Marcia argues that relationships and an ongoing tension between independence and connectedness are at the heart of all of Erickson's psychological stages for both men and women. So as we grow, there is an ongoing tension between, independence and connectedness. Because we want to grow up and be independent people, but we also want to stay close to our family. and we want to move on in life and go to school or job, whatever, but we want to stay close to our friends that we had before. So, there's a constant struggle there, and we have to find a balance, so that we can have a fulfilling life. Self-esteem during adolescence develops largely in the context of relationships with peers. So, as a teenager, you feel most successful and you have more self-esteem if you have friends. And that can be unfortunate because if you live in a place where there's not a lot of kids, or there's not a lot of kids in your school that like you for one reason or another. Sometimes stuff starts back in kindergarten. There's like this kid in our class that they called Stinky, and I mean for the rest of his time, that's how they knew him, and so he didn't have a lot of friends. He had like a couple little guys that hang out with him, and that's unfortunate. But unfortunately, kids can be mean, and stuff like that sticks with you, and so you might not feel like you're very successful at relationships, and you might have low self-esteem because of labels that other mean kids put on you. Particularly those of the same sex, because I talked to clients about this before, that we all go through a homosexual stage, and by saying that, I don't mean that you're being gay. I mean you prefer to be around the same sex. So as a teenager, you want the guys or the girls to like you. You want to be included. And if you're not, that affects your self-esteem. In line with Gilligan's view, male self-esteem seems to be linked with striving for individual achievement. So, when the guy is striving for individual achievement and he feels like he's becoming a man and he can do it on his own, that's when he develops, some self-esteem. Whereas female self-esteem depends more on connections with others. And that's to a certain extent. Also, women also want to achieve their goals. But we also like to feel connected to other people. We like to have relationships with other people. And females even like categorize friends. This is a work friend. This is a going to movies friend. This and that's just how women are. We like to make connections with other people. We're basically friendly, happy people, and that's sometimes not something men really dig. In one longitudinal study, 84 mostly white, socioeconomically diverse young adults whose self-esteem had been measured at ages 14 and 18 described memories about important experiences with others. So they had experiences with others that either impacted their self-esteem in a good way or a bad way. It just depends on what the experience was, because those things stick with us. When someone says something nice to you or about you, that makes you feel good and it sticks with you. When someone says something mean about you or hurtful, that also sticks with you, and not a good way. Men who had high self-esteem during adolescence tended to recall wanting to assert themselves with male friends. So, they wanted to be assertive with their male friends. Didn't want them to lead them into anything, or, didn't want to give in to peer pressure. And that's part of being a man, is that, you do what you want to do. Whereas women who had high self-esteem recalled efforts to help female friends, because that's what we want to do. We feel good when we help people with things. I've heard a sociologist say one time that the categories that they were told were that men are destructive and women are constructive. Now, I disagree with that. Not all men are destructive. There are plenty of destructive women out there who have destructive patterns of behavior. And not all women are constructive, because there are a lot of women, who have these problems. And there are men who are constructive and, like to build relationships and build, peace, and, are into creating and things. So you can't generalize the sexes that hard, you know. Efforts that involved asserting themselves in a collaborative rather than a competitive way. Now, that is something that we need more of today, because women are mean to each other a lot. You know, collaborating means working with one another. You know, not trying to get your foot up on the other person, not backbiting on the other person, you know, not cutting a person out of your life when you're done with them because you're basically using them. That's not good. That's competitive behavior. Now, women have learned competitive behavior since we've been in the workplace. We've learned it from men, where you want to climb the corporate ladder and you step on other people if it helps you to climb. And that's unfortunate. And this behavior all goes back to the back of your brain, the reptilian part of your brain, the fight or flight, you know, to where you feel like you have to fight to get ahead, you know. So it's an unfortunate leftover, you know, from back in the days when we first stood up. Some research suggests that adolescent girls have lower self-esteem than adolescent boys. And that's because girls worry so much about what other people think, you know. And if anyone says anything negative, it impacts her to the heart. Whereas if to say something to a boy, he might be able to shrug it off, man, whatever, you know. And you know, girls are bombarded by these images in the media of these people who don't really look like this. You know, they've had surgery, they've been digitally altered, and so they think they have to look this way. Highly publicized studies during the early 1990s found that girls' self-confidence and self-esteem stay fairly high until age 11 or 12. So girls are pretty much on an even keel with the boys till that, you know, middle school age kicks in, and then tends to falter. And why is that? Because their bodies are developing and changing, because women do that about 3 years on average sooner than men. And, you know, they're feeling a little insecure about, you know, how they look and what's going on with their body. A recent analysis of hundreds of studies involving nearly 150,000 respondents concluded that boys and men do have higher self-esteem than girls and women. Again, because they don't care so much about what other people think about them. And that's something we could learn from the men, because we do care too much about what people think about us as women, in general. You know, everybody's different, but in general. Especially in late adolescence, because that's when, you know, we're getting ready to come out into the world. And if we didn't have the greatest experience in adolescence, we might not feel ready. We might not feel like we're good enough, you know, ready enough, whatever enough you might feel you're lacking. And that's all going into self-esteem. But the difference is small. So the gap between male and female attitudes about self-esteem and things is small. But the males have the edge of they're not so super concerned with what other people think about them. And like I say, that's something we can learn from the guys. Contrary to the earlier finding, both males and females seem to gain self-esteem with age. And that's because we realize that those mean kids, that's all they were. Mean kids. They probably had a really bad home life. They were miserable. And so they couldn't, you know, take it out on their parents. So they come to school and take it out on you. So, you know, we start to realize with age that all that BS back there was just that. BS. And it no longer affects our life anymore. And we are in charge of our life. And as you experience more relationships with people in the workplace and things, you start to realize what type of relationships you want and what type you don't want, what you'll accept in your life and what you won't. And that's how we gain self-esteem as we age. Ethnic factors in identity formation. And yes, ethnicity plays a part in you discovering who you are. What happens to young people's identity when the values of their ethnic community conflict with those of larger society. And we have that here in America. Now, a lot of countries, we're not as ethnically mixed, but it's getting to be where almost every place is nowadays. So, if your ethnic group is a fairly new group to America, and traditionally you do things a certain way, and then you come to America, and in America things are done a different way, that's going to cause you some, cognizant dissonance, because, now you have to navigate that and say, well, which way do I believe? For example, when American Indians are expected to participate in a tribal ceremony on a day when they are also supposed to be in school, and schools have gotten to be more inclusive about that. I had an incident about that at work. I worked part-time, used to taking a day off. If I need a day off, I just tell the boss, not coming in. I gotta do this thing. Okay, well, my son was dancing in a powwow at school. They had a little powwow at school. It was definitely not a tribal event. There were some culturally insensitive things happening there. There were some parents who were, mostly Native American, who kind of pointed these things out, and I was just like, man, what are you gonna do? But I told the new boss I was taking the day off, and they were like, oh no, I need you here. Why are you taking a day off? And I was like, because my son's dancing in a powwow, and I'm gonna go see that. And she's like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know that that's important enough to miss a day. And I'm like, yes, it is. Because basically that's a spiritual get together. It's like a church meeting, So, in America, not all Americans are up on what other cultures do. So, I could have cried to, I actually talked to the labor board about them before because of breaks. They didn't like to give people breaks, and that's the law that you get breaks. So, I thought about doing it again, but like, no, maybe that's just her ignorant self. I'm not going there again, but, I could have said, discrimination, but, Or when young people face and perhaps internalize, taken to their own value system, prejudice against their own ethnic group. Now, there are people like that. I knew a girl who was African American, and she only hung out with Caucasian girls because she kind of was going with the stereotypes that there were about African Americans going on. And she was talking about the hair thing, and the ghetto attitudes. So, I didn't get it. A lot of people didn't get it. It was a thing. Or when discrimination limits their occupational choices, as it did for Jackie Robinson's brother Mac, who, after his Olympic glory, came home to a succession of menial jobs. So, being a minority could keep you down where you can't rise to the level that, somebody might be able to. So, there are people who don't believe that's true, but sometimes it is, because the opportunities aren't there. I mean, I've been limited by opportunities before, by not having the ability to do things that, I could have done or wanted to do. So I know that's real. That's a real thing. All these situations can lead to identity confusion. So, all these things can kind of put you in a space where you don't really know who you are and what you believe. And, that could be a problem in your life. Identity formation is especially complicated for young people in minority groups. In fact, for some adolescents, ethnicity may be central to identity formation. So some come up, and I've known people like that, who, being in your ethnic group is the most important thing in your life. It doesn't matter what else is going on, what else you want to do. Their belief system is the most important thing, and how they do things, and whether they take care of the parents, grandparents, whatever. That's the most important thing in their life, and that can also cause you some problems. Skin color and other physical features. So if you grew up and maybe you were told that like this race doesn't like this race, then you would believe that. And then if you are that race and you think that they're the ideal and you're not, then that also creates some identity confusion. We have a lot of that going on in this country. Language differences. If you can't speak the language, that's a problem. And I think personally, if you come to a country where there's a majority language, you should learn to speak that language. And that's, just for your own good. Because even though we don't have a national language, the majority of people in America speak English. And if you can't speak English, we had a thing not too long ago about a restaurant. The guy was running a restaurant. Our waiter could not understand English. But yet he was trying to serve us. We were trying to order, and he didn't know the names of things that we were trying to order, even though they're like right here on the menu. So he had to go get someone who spoke better English to come and help us out. So that held him back, because I'm sure, he wasn't put in many situations like that again, or he, had to be trained better so that he understood what was going on. So when you don't speak the language, that can be a barrier to your success, which is going to hurt your self-esteem. And stereotypical social standing can be extremely influential in molding minority adolescents' self-concept. So if you think there's a problem with you, then you're going to act like there's a problem with you, and you're going to project that there's a problem with you, and then you're going to have a self-fulfilling prophecy that people believe there's a problem with you. So, these are bad things when they come into play. They can affect your self-identity. Teenagers have wider social networks and more mobility than younger children, because they even start, driving a car when they're a teenager. And greater cognitive awareness of cultural attitudes and distinctions. So they're a little more astute about what's going on around them, what they hear, what's being said, and that can feed into problems with their identity. Caught between two cultures, many minority youth are keenly conscious of conflicts between the values stressed at home and those dominant in the wider society. So, if what's going on in the wider society is not what's going on at home, again, there's some cognizant dissonance. They're realizing, oh, well, my family says this is important, but yet everyone else is, all the other kids, that's the thing at that age. All the other kids are saying this or doing this. So that's going to cause them, some cognizant dissonance and, affect their identity formation. Despite positive appraisals by parents, teachers, community, and peers, minority adolescents' self-perceptions may, as Erickson noted, reflect negative views of their group by the majority culture. So, if they hear prejudice talk, they're liable to internalize that and think all people. I had a woman, an African American woman, ask me one time, "Are all white people this way? Do they believe this? And I was like, no, of course not. And she said, well, that's what my, mother believes. And that's what she told me. And I'm like, no, of course not. Everybody's different. And, now there's unfortunately a movement here in America of people whose ancestors might have, believed a certain way, who I'm talking about, south of Mason-Dixon, but certainly everyone else was not that way. So, you can't say all of one race is like a certain way, or all of another race is like a certain way, because that's certainly not true. We're all individuals, and you need to base your identity on who you are as a person, not on who you think the majority culture thinks you are, because then you're selling yourself short. Research dating back to the late 1970s and early 1980s has identified 4 stages of ethnic identity based on Marcia's identity statuses. And again, these aren't steps, these are statuses. Number 1, diffuse. Juanita has done little or no exploration of her ethnicity and does not clearly understand the issues involved. So, it's not a thing to her. She's not worried about it. 2, foreclosed. Kwame has done little or no exploration of his ethnicity, but has clear feelings about it. These feelings may be positive or negative, depending on the attitudes he absorbed at home. So, it just depends on what he's learned growing up. Number 3, moratorium. Chosan has begun to explore her ethnicity, but is confused about what it means to be her. So, she's probably trying to balance what she's learned at home with what, is going on in the larger society. Number 4, achieved. Diego has explored his ethnicity and understands and accepts it. And, that's good for him. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. And like I said, for those of us who are multi-ethnic, it's a little bit harder. But since that's becoming a majority here in America, it's not as hard as it used to be because, you meet even more people like you. Excuse me. In a study of 64 African American, Asian American, and Hispanic American 10th graders from 2 Los Angeles high schools, researchers who coded the adolescents' responses to interviews and questionnaires were able to reliably assign all but 4 young people to 3 categories. So, most everyone, except for these 4 kids who, for whatever reason or another, they couldn't figure out where they were, but they might have just not been super interested in answering and didn't bother. So, we don't know. Almost half of the sample, 33, were diffuse/foreclosed. The researchers combined these 2 categories, both involving lack of exploration of ethnicity, because they could not clearly distinguish between them on the basis of the young people's responses. So based on the young people's responses, they couldn't necessarily tell if ethnicity was playing a part in, the answers that they were given. The other half were either in, excuse me, moratorium or had apparently achieved identity. And that's our goal. When we're raising kids, we want them to achieve a self-identity, and a lot of things get in the way from point A to point B, from the day you're born to the day you decide you know who you are. So any little thing can knock you off track and mess up your self-identity. So, if you get there, that's good that you know who you are and what you want out of life. And if you're still working on it, don't worry about it, because there's a lot of steps and you'll get there in your own time. And the more negative input you have, the longer it's going to take for you to overcome that negative input and get it figured out. So give yourself a little break if you didn't have the best upbringing and experiences socially growing up. Members of different ethnic groups found different issues critical. So even within the same, groups, different people can have different things. And, in different ethnic groups, people have different ideas of what's most important. Hispanics were highly conscious of prejudice against their group. And that's, we even have people running for offices who are coming out against, Hispanics. And it's like, this is America. We have the, plaque on the Statue of Liberty, give us your tired, you're poor, huddle masses, yearning to breathe free. This is America. So it's not like we're being invaded by a hostile army. Now, everyone who comes is not a good person, but everyone who lives in this country and is born in this country is not a good person, you know? So, you know, to try and have a race walled off out of the country, that's just racist. It's ridiculous. And I can't believe that we even have officials that talk like this out loud in public and think it's perfectly fine. Personally, I believe that makes them ignorant, and they're a narcissistic sociopath anyway. So, you know, par for the course. Asian Americans struggled with pressures for academic achievement because the parents know that the better you do, the better you're going to be able to get into a good college, better able you're going to get into work. So that's, their concern. African American girls were keenly aware that they did not meet the white standards of beauty. And that's because the media is pushing that on them. All people of all races are beautiful. I mean, beauty is measured in symmetry, so it really doesn't matter what color your skin is. And even if you're not perfectly symmetrical, you can still be beautiful. Personally, it's like the old song back in the 70s, everybody's beautiful in their own way. So I feel like that should be, what we got going on instead of some of the things we got going on nowadays. African American boys were more concerned about job discrimination and the negative societal image of black males. So they want to make sure they get their fair shake. And they don't like that, there's a saying, I've heard, black women say this, that black men don't stay with their family. They don't raise a family. They get people pregnant and they run off, and they don't support the children and things of that nature. So there are stereotypes about black men, even in, black culture. That's a shame because there are plenty of black men who do get married, raise their kids, stay with the family. So, well, that's where I'm going to leave you today. I hope that helped you to figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go on my Patreon page and become a patron. That's all for now. Until next time.